Let's get more on this now with Tom O'Connor, a senior foreign policy writer at Newsweek. He joins us now from New York. Good to have you back on the program, Tom. The US, as we know, has stepped up sanctions against Russia in light of the atrocities that have emerged in Bucha. Vladimir Putin's daughters are now among those targeted. How effective will this be in terms of raising the economic pressure on Putin?
It's difficult to say right now because a lot of these sanctions, if they do work, will probably have long-term effects, and it will take some time to really, I think, inflict the pain that the world that is supporting these sanctions really wants to see, and especially what the White House wants to see. So that's why you hear President Biden and his officials going out there and saying that, it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to see Russia crumble overnight or its economy, but you will see it atrophy in the way that it has. At the same time, it does seem to be part of what President Putin has factored in as far as costs into this conflict. There are a lot of creative ways to dodge sanctions that we've seen other countries do, and Russia certainly has a lot of resources available to it, not just to sustain itself, but also to dodge those sanctions. And I'm sure right now it has plenty of outlets it's looking for. Whether the U.S. can expose those outlets in time, I think that's really the question.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister has urged residents of the eastern regions of Kharkiv, Luhansk and Donetsk to evacuate as fears grow that Russia will intensify its attacks there. This comes as Moscow withdraws completely from the region around Kiev, the capital. What do you believe is Russia's strategy right now?
Sure. So what seems to be happening is absolutely Russia is withdrawing from the parts deeper into Ukraine near Kyiv, that area, and seems to be pushing more towards the east, regrouping there. And so we could read this two ways. One is that Russia faced very fierce resistance in these areas, and we know it's been weeks of stalled advances towards the capital, which was nearly surrounded but never quite taken. So obviously Russia is cutting its losses. That's one way of looking at it. The other way is that Russia always wanted to seek this eastern region, and we've seen that where talks are right now, negotiations that were taking place in Turkey, was that Ukrainian officials already said that they might be open to staying neutral from NATO. So if that demand is somewhat satisfied in Russia's mind, the other side is the territorial concessions, which is something that Ukrainian officials have been more hesitant to discuss. So perhaps at this point right now, Russia sees that as the priority, which would be those eastern regions, and of course Crimea, which has been under Russian control since 2014.
Ukraine, of course, has warned that Russia has committed atrocities in the town of Bucha. Now there are pictures emerging from the town of Borodyanka. Officials say atrocities there may be even worse than in Bucha. What do you think should happen in response to these findings? Is an investigation into it simply enough?
Yeah, well, Ukrainian authorities have already started quite an extensive investigation since we've spoken to them. U.S. officials are also backing these investigations to some degree as well. Now, the question is, with President Biden calling President Putin a war criminal and wanting him to essentially face justice, see court, where does that leave U.S.-Russia relations? And I think that the priority right here, for Ukraine at least, is to see this conflict ended, to find some sort of negotiated settlement. For the U.S., I think it'd be very difficult to see President Biden, President Putin, perhaps any U.S. president meeting with Putin anytime soon if he's charged with war crimes, because as we know, there's very little chance that he would actually see court. Russia's not a member of the ICC, nor is the U.S., and the U.S. also has a precedent of cooperating with such investigations and actually blocking them. So I think that it would be mostly a political, rhetorical attack on Russia there.
Okay, Tom O'Connor from Newsweek, always a pleasure. Thank you for that.